Hi, hello there, and welcome back to Empowering Empathy, where we talk about the power of compassion, personal growth, and professional success. And today, once again, we have my co-host, Mr. Brian Marcum.
Hello, Mr. Walker.
Who is the expert on all things Brian, as we like to say. And we have a special guest, Mr. Jim Diebold. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Michael.
How are you?
Great, thanks.
Thank you both for joining us once again for another exciting episode. Brian, you want to tell us what we're talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jim, for joining us.
Pleasure.
As you guys know, empathy is a big part. It's one of our core values. It's this topic. The title of this podcast is Empowering Empathy. I did a 2-weekend boot camp where I went through trying to find out how is Brian unique. And one thing that the 2 words that I came up with was my goal in life is to empower empathy in people's lives. And what does that mean? That means that if you have empathy for someone else and you see life through their eyes, then you can really begin to appreciate and understand and have a relationship with that individual and have a partnership with that individual, whether that's you selling them something or whether that's you just being a caring friend to them. And so empathy is a big component to our need here. And so there's lots of different ways that you can evaluate oneself around empathy. I often joke that, I don't often joke, but the phrase that I've heard a while back is self-awareness is a superpower. It's something that if you can know who you are inside and out, you can approach every single situation, every single relationship, every single conversation with that, so that way they know who you are. And I got a funny joke at the end about that. But one of my favorite experiences that we've done over the past couple years is working with Mr. Diebold here and his organization, Focal Point. You are a business coaching service. You want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, thanks, Brian. Yeah, so my name's Jim Diebold. I am a business coach with Focal Point. And it's something I've been doing for the last 4.5 years after I stepped out of the corporate space and business ownership space myself. I just wanted to do something where I was going to make a bigger impact to the people I was serving. So I get to do that every day by partnering with folks like yourself, like Golden Technologies.
Sure. So Focal Point is a franchise system organization throughout the entire country.
Correct.
And you are a franchisee here in the Cincinnati market, correct?
Correct.
And so I think we've talked and you've learned that Focal Point as a whole organization has a ton of great tools and resources for you to leverage and share with your clients. Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, absolutely. So arguably one of the most prolific business coaches ever is Brian Tracy and his partner Cam Frazier. And so I have at my disposal their entire library of books, of content, not to mention the content that other coaches have created based on their experience and their background. So I have an entire arsenal besides my own personal experiences in the corporate space and business ownership space. I have this massive arsenal that helps me bring the right and best value to the people I'm serving.
Sure. So a couple years ago, we were in this rapid growth phase coming out of COVID 2020, 2021, 22. We just saw this huge escalation, and our team internally went from 4 or 5 people to 20 people on this side of the pond, and then over in India it went from 8, 10 to 35. So we had huge growth, huge culture threats, not bad, but just wanted to make sure everything was in check. So I wanted to make sure the leadership team was fully in check with knowing one another, knowing who they are, what motivates them. And so I know everybody's heard of probably the DISC profile. There's a lot of people who probably roll their eyes at it because we took it back in 12th grade in high school, 1905. But it's what I have found working with Jim is that it's not just taking the test and knowing who you are, but it's then deciphering that information and then knowing where other people sit in that circle. And then being that way, when you interact with those individuals, you know what motivates them, what kind of person it is, and so forth. So tell us a little bit about what we went through a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I'll definitely appreciate the opportunity. First, I want to throw something out there that I think people will resonate with people, because we talk about empathy. And as a rule, we tend to speak to other people the way we like to be spoken to. And a lot of our communication challenges come from the fact that if I'm a overbearing person and it's just natural for me, like if I say my volume is a 2 out of 10 from my perspective, but to you it might be 10 out of 10 because I'm not aware of what drives and motivates you. So there are obviously numerous assessments that are available, and a lot of organizations use the tools. But to the point you made, it's not just taking the assessment, because unfortunately, most of the time it just winds up in a desk drawer. It's actually, what is this assessment telling me? How do I leverage this so I can be intentional about it, as opposed to this is a great exercise, what's next down the road. So DISC is one that I personally use, a Focal Point personally uses, and it allows us to understand behavior. DISC is specifically around behavior and communication styles. And once we understand not only ourselves, but then do a little training around it, we can start to understand, oh, now I understand what actually makes Brian tick and what is causing him to say certain things or not say certain things, etc., because now I get it.
Right. And so, as we mentioned, this has been around for years. It's more just like any other tool. It's about the application,
Yes.
not about the tool itself. So, but for those folks that don't know the DISC profile, let's talk a little bit about the 4 quadrants. So it's a test that you go through, right?
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about the test to start.
Yeah, so the assessment is simple. It's just going to ask you to force 4 statements in order. And it's challenging on purpose because the nuances are what make up the difference in whether you're higher in a D or an I or higher in an S and a C.
How long does the test take?
Oh, maybe 30 minutes. It's fairly quick.
Like 50 questions?
It's very simple. That part, honestly, I don't remember, but it might be 50 questions. It's not too bad.
Like, what's an example of a typical DISC pro? Like, which 2 of these
Correct.
represent you the most, kind of thing?
Well, it's going to give you 4 statements, and then you order them from most agree with to least agree with, from how I approach challenges to, for example, do I take a challenge head on, or am I a little more shy and timid about it, kind of hoping it just goes away? Now, there'll be more specific components to that, but that's a category, if you will. Or even how I react with people, how I react in regards to how I like pace of my day.
Sure.
Or am I a rule follower or not? So it asks you to force those types of statements in order. And then obviously based upon how they bake out determines where your 4 styles fall.
Sure. So I think there's a circle up there now, or has been up there on the screen that people are watching.
Yep,
Let's
it's
talk
up now.
about, thanks, Michael.
I had it up a little bit earlier, but it's up
Fantastic.
again.
Appreciate it. And then we're going to talk about, what some of Michael and I's findings were a little bit. But what does the D stand for?
So D is dominance. That's kind of how we associate a type A personality. But for all people, we all have D in us. The question is to what degree. So it's how we approach problems and challenges.
Right.
I is influence, and that is the social piece. How do I approach people and contacts? So obviously a higher I is someone that's going to be very social. A lower I is going to be less social. S is stabilizing or steadiness. That's how I like my pace and consistency of the day to be. So if I have a lower S, I probably want things to be pretty fast and erratic. If I have a higher S, I want it to be slower. C is being cautious or a rule follower.
Right.
So they're the ones that believe rules should be followed, and they get really stressed out when they're not. So when you take a scenario of, like, let's take a sales organization where it's not uncommon to have that kind of type A salesperson, and then support staff that might be more on the high C. So that stereotypical
Yes.
type A salesperson believes rules are meant to be broken in their favor, barring anything illegal, of course. And then the high C, who believes rules should be followed, is a very stressful scenario. So that communication, because of how the behaviors work, can easily become a stressful scenario.
Welcome to the conflict between sales and operations.
Yes.
Or sales and Brian and operations.
But those are real things, right?
No, but if you're aware of that, so if you're aware of that, so if I'm not mistaken, I was a high D and a high
High
I.
D, high I.
What does that mean?
Well, so first of all, these aren't meant to be labels
Yep.
because you can be what's deemed or called a high D and high I. Someone else can be deemed the same, but their levels are lower than yours.
Yeah.
Based on their scores, they could still be called a high D, high I, but they're different from you because the scores are different and the makeup of the other
It's
two
not
scores
only just the
are
label
different.
of the 4 letters, but it's also the number score
That absolutely
of each one of those.
it
So
all matters.
I was pretty high up there with the D.
You were a high D. You were over 90 out of 100 in D and over 80 out of 100 in I. So 2 things. D and I are our extrovert styles.
Yep.
S and C are our introvert styles. There's more to that. D and C are actually task-oriented people. S's and I's are people-oriented people. So back to your question regarding D and I, it just means that you are driven as a rule. So these are all rules. There's always exceptions.
Right.
Driven, may not be super focused on any one thing for an extended period of time because you tend to operate well in chaos, in a chaotic scenario. You're the type of personality that enjoys juggling balls and spinning plates, as they say, and going from one thing to another, whereas rapidly. Whereas someone that's a high C and or a high S is going to be more inclined to want to work on one thing at a time, do it extremely well, and then move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so let's pick on Michael. What was Michael?
Well, Michael is an
anomaly.
Yes. How about that?
Shocker.
What does that mean, anomaly? Is he like Superman?
So, in some ways,
Yes.
emotionally,
Yes,
yes.
it does.
What is
No, not really.
Someone else took the test for him.
what is traditional or typical is you'll have 2 styles above what they call the energy line, which is simply the 50% line, 50 out of 100. So 2 styles tend to be higher than the other 2, sometimes 3. It's rare that you have all 4 kind of within single digits of each other. So his happens to be one that is very kind of level and even keel.
So you said the word before, like chameleon. So he can
Versatile.
hang, versatile.
Yeah.
Flexible.
Chameleon's a bad word. You're right, but it's more like if he gets into an audience with a guy like me,
Yep.
who's up top, and then you get someone that's more on the S and the C, he can be able to flip and break into those conversations.
Yes, I would
One
say.
might say I have a little bit of empathy. Huh?
There you go.
By the way, the S style is where the majority of empathy comes from. The person that is a high S is the person that's the loyal team member. Not that they can't be a leader, but they really enjoy being part of the team.
Yeah.
They're very loyal, very dedicated, and empathy is a big component of that particular style.
Right.
Doesn't mean if you're a low S, you don't have empathy and you're not loyal. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means it's more obvious in someone that's a high S.
So what was cool is after we did the leadership team, so we had our VP of recruiting, our VP of sales, our CFO, our director VP of marketing, and we all sat in a room.
Yeah.
And you spent a solid
half a day.
Half a day,
Mm-hmm.
just going into each one of ours personnel. What would you call it? Behaviors. And I think we did that a couple of years ago. I think we need to do it again, or at least have a refresher course, because it really allowed us. Like, yeah, I see. Like a week ago when I said that to Chris, I could see the steam coming out of his ears,
Right.
because I didn't approach it and I overwhelmed him with too much stuff.
Right.
And whereas he's better at solving problems than I am because he takes them on one at a time.
Yep.
And I just throw 5 of them up in the air and go, here you go.
Yeah. So there's, to stick with that example for a second, someone that's a high D is capable and comfortable of making decisions quickly, and they're okay with the consequences because they're ultimately going to pick up the pieces and move on. Actually, they'll probably have somebody else pick up the pieces, but they're moving on. The high C, on the other hand, is very fearful of making a wrong decision So they will overcompensate by looking at as much data as they think is necessary, but there's no end. So that's where the term analysis paralysis comes in. But you have pros and cons to both. The high D makes a decision quickly. If it's a wrong decision, you got to start over. The high C may not make a decision, and so you lose a lot of time. So there's pros and cons both ways. So that's the importance of when we sit down, we did the individual debriefs with each member of the team to help them understand their behaviors, but we also added driving forces in there, which is why. So we had how and why and put them together for your team. Mm-hmm. But then when we did the team debrief, you got to see everyone's scores on the assessment, which created a few light bulb moments, and we had fun with it, right? We were joking about some of the tendencies of
Sure.
everybody on the team. And I want to say this too, we're all smart people. You guys have been together for a long time, or your family members or whatever. And what I mean by we're smart people is we pick up on, like, this person likes this kind of thing, this person doesn't. We can do those, like, unintentionally. But when you take an assessment like this and work through what it's actually telling you, now instead of being accidentally good at communication, you can be intentionally good at communication.
Yeah, I've even seen, I mean, we didn't go this far, but I've seen, and granted now with COVID, a lot of us are remote on a regular basis, is in their offices, they would have their disc profile either outside their door, and then I've also seen these fun little square blocks, the 4 blocks of the DISC, and sat on their desk. So, hey, I'm walking into a high C here. Let me make sure I don't, I stay on topic. And I mean, I mask my ADHD with my high D and high I, so I just got to stay focused in those conversations.
Yeah, and it can be challenging.
I still want Michael to retake the test, though. I still think
He wants to know just how anomalous I may be.
Yeah. I think he's had like 4 people take the test at the same time.
No.
Well, but see, the thing is, with
It's impressive, Michael. Actually, I mean,
but see, with results like that, and really, it doesn't matter. It's there's no right or wrong. There just is. And what does it mean? Well, even though he had a healthy D, his is going to be exhibited in a very different way that yours is. Not only because of how high yours is versus his, but also because the other styles are very close in balance. So his D is going to come out at different times in a different way than yours might. His S is going to come out at different times for different reasons than yours. So even though categorically it's how we deal with problems and challenges, people and contacts, pace and consistency, and rules and constraints, how it comes out is different. I've had people with as low as a score of 5 out of 100 in a category. But whatever those questions were in particular that caused that 5 out of 100 come up, whenever they're in that situation, you'll see it.
really,
It won't be very often, but you'll see it in that situation.
It's crazy. Yeah. So to wrap it up, as self-awareness is a superpower, and awareness of your team and knowing what makes them tick is how someone with my crazy personality can still have empathy, because I'm not a C, I think.
A low C,
low,
yeah.
And usually
Really
has the best empathy.
low.
And a funny joke about that is this about a year ago, I was looking at my phone walking, and I tripped, and I dropped my phone, and I cracked the screen. And my daughter, who was in high school at the time, I was talking to myself. I'm like, I'm such an idiot. And she says, Dad, you are an idiot, but you're very self-aware. And I'm like, that was
perfect.
That was pretty good, actually. So just a little bit of tidbit. Obviously there's a lot of good tools. I highly recommend Jim and his team and just the tools that he's been given. Jim, it's been
I really enjoyed it. I just want to add that.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
And he's been
It's
doing
huge.
individual coaching with our team, obviously with the stresses of the economy and the stresses of the workforce and all the fun stuff. Some of the individual one-on-one coaching has been incredibly valuable as well. So looking forward to working with you more in the future. But the biggest takeaway here is always be growing your team around empathy and self-awareness and individual awareness and team development. Don't just do silly team building exercises, but get down deep into each individual's behaviors and get to know one another, because that's when real relationships, and just as we know, you need to build a relationship first to gain the trust. Then when the conflict comes, you can handle those things better because you have that trust and that bond.
Yeah, as a parting comment to that, and it absolutely filters into your disc style, but I'm sure this resonates with the majority of the listeners. We listen to respond, right? Because we want to be included. We want to share our story. So we listen to respond. So 2 things you can do right off the bat to demonstrate true empathy is, number 1, listen to learn.
Yeah.
And then when they say, we did X, Y, Z, or this happened to me, don't share your story right behind it, because you just negated their story.
Exactly.
So just listen to learn, and then when appropriate, share your story.
Yeah. And for a person with my personality trait, like literally when someone's about a third of the way into their whatever they're sharing with me, I'm already concocting what to say back.
Yes,
So you
it's
will
normal.
literally sometimes see me in meetings do this. Because what I'm telling myself is, Marcum, you're not listening to understand, you're listening to respond.
Yep.
And so it's taken me a while. The muscle has gotten bigger as far as being able to, like, they don't care what you think, just listen to them.
That's right.
You know?
They want to be heard right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Here you go, Mr. Walker.
That's my one thing. Listen to learn.
Listen to learn.
That's great.
Love it. Awesome. Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy.
Michael, appreciate it.
Yep, Jim, thanks for joining us today. Brian, thanks again as always.
Yep.
And, hey, just a reminder, join us next week, same time, same channel. And, we'll have something else great to talk about and share. This has been Empowering Empathy, and this is the show where we talk about the power of compassion, personal growth, and professional success. And we're getting out of here, so we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Bye, everybody.